All right, welcome to the Small Town Pastor Podcast. This podcast is a ministry of Small Town Network. We exist to make disciples, train pastors, and plant churches in smaller communities. My name is Eric. I'm joined again for a second episode with Tony Colomb and Chris Goetz, who's the pastor at the Garnett. Is it First Christian Church, Garnett?
Hmm.
All
Yep.
right. Is there a second Christian church by any chance? I'm just asking.
Great
Yes,
question.
it's not called anything close to ours. There is an Assemblies of God church. There's a Nazarene church. There are two Baptist churches. There is what they call Beacon of Light. There is a Catholic church. Yes, we are a very churched community.
How many
Actually,
church?
there's a True Vine church. There's
All in
another.
Garnett?
Yeah, 13, I believe.
13 churches in
Wow.
a town of 3,000. That's incredible.
That's
So
amazing.
that's the Bible Belt, right?
So wait, there's two Baptist churches. Are they First and Second Baptist?
No, they at least changed their names farther than
Oh,
that.
okay.
But might
Because
as
I
well.
mean that is a solid question, right? There's all kinds of First Baptist, First Christians, but you never see like Second Baptist,
Dude, no,
Second.
no, no. I was driving in
Washington, D.C.
Missouri this last
Really?
week. I crossed into Missouri and I was by Springfield or something, like some bigger city, and there was like this massive church on the highway, and it literally was like Second Baptist Church. And I'm like, get out of town. Like you didn't like, rebrand or something. It looked
Oh
like a church
man.
that's probably like thousands of people, and their
Mm.
name is literally like the best we could come up with is Second Baptist Church.
Is it like their church verse is one of those like he's greater than I, or he must come first, I must come second, like one of those types of things, you know?
That's amazing. All right, so First Christian Church of Garnett. So we kind of talked last time, just telling your story of like how you became a believer and what got you to Bible college, Ozark Christian College, and then eventually your journeys took you to Garnett, Kansas. So tell us about that. You started as a youth minister, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how long did you do that? Tell us kind of that because obviously you're a senior minister now. So why don't
Mhm.
you just walk us through the story of how you went from like youth minister to eventually to senior minister?
Yeah, I was youth minister when I came on board in a church that was very elderly.
Mm.
We had it was a large quantity, somewhere around 400 people actively, but over
Wow.
almost all over the age of 60. And so they saw the writing on the wall that if they didn't do something, they wouldn't have a church for much longer, and it was wise of them to make that move. Uh,
Mm.
we went round and round about what my expectations would be, who would be my actual leadership versus was it the whole board? Was it a committee? Was it going to be the senior pastor? And thankfully, we opted on the senior pastor. He was the one who hired me, and I was working under him for 2 years until he resigned. The one who we hired, let's see, I kind of got to fulfill all the roles within the church for about 7 months, and then became the youth pastor again, which I was happy about. I love the kids. I
Mm.
had never had a desire to be the senior minister, and so went back
That's
to get to just hang out with the kids instead of the kids and the older kids,
Mm.
which I've learned is a very real thing. Um, we spent another 2 years under another senior minister, and I could tell a lot of stories about struggles we had during that season, but for sake of protecting people, I won't.
Mm.
I will say when that man resigned, we ended up with about a year where we didn't have senior ministry leadership and a lot of struggles during that year. Finally, the elders came to me and said, "Chris, we'd really like you to apply for the senior ministry position." And I said, "Well, if I'm applying, that means I'm competing with someone else." And they said, "Yeah." I said, "Nope, I'm not going to do it because if you hire them, then I have to leave. And I love it here. I don't want to leave Garnett, Kansas."
good for you.
And so I said, if you get to the point where they don't want us or we don't want them and there's no one left, I will throw my name in the hat.
Mm.
Wait, that's kind of what happened when I hired you in Oregon.
That's funny.
Might be a theme there.
You're you're the last pick at the playground, Chris. Oh my
You know
God,
what?
that
As long as the one picking me is my savior, I don't care who, what order.
Okay, Jesus
well
Juke.
played. Well played. You're God's pick,
Uh,
brother. I
Jesus
love it.
Juke.
you
I
know,
love it.
so they finally got to that point. They had gone through maybe 50 candidates, and either they didn't want to come to Garnett or they weren't people that we felt would lead well here.
Right.
And so we ended up putting our name in the hat.
Mm.
And they interviewed us, and the seniors said, "We don't think we will like this guy." I said, "Well, you love me as the youth pastor."
They
And
Right.
literally said
they were
that?
like, yeah,
Right.
quite a few
Oh
of them actually. In
man.
fact, when I was hired as the senior minister, we broke history 2 times in one vote because the senior pastor here is voted on. It's the only vote our church takes is the senior pastor. And we had the most people in the history of our church vote that Sunday. We also had the most no votes of any pastor who has ever been voted in.
Wow.
We literally
Dude.
got the vote by 7. So I figured that's a godly
Wow.
number.
Take that, haters.
And I asked the elders, I said, "Are you sure you want me to be this guy?" Because
The
at that
Lord
time,
has spoken. The Lord has spoken. 7 votes.
Yeah.
That's the
Op-
mandate.
Open the seventh seal. Let's go.
I love it.
I'm really not
Oh,
sure that I was totally convinced that that's what I was supposed to be
oh
doing. I
man.
was already preaching, and the only difference was now I have to look for a youth pastor to do the job that I love doing.
Dude,
And
I listen, hold on a second. Like, I don't think people realize sometimes what they do to us. You
Mm.
know, it's like a popularity contest, like where we're gonna take a vote and then you like I mean, that had to be like a little bit of a rain cloud over your head to go, I only got the job by 7 votes. Like, didn't that kind of start you off like under like feeling like a little pressure or
Yeah.
undervalued or
Yeah.
underappreciated or something?
it did until my youth group kids told me that all of them voted against me because they wanted me to stay the youth pastor. And
Oh,
that
okay.
was over
Oh,
60 of the numbers that voted against me.
You actually are
wow.
lovable. And they let kids vote?
14 and up.
Wow,
Wow.
okay.
Hmm.
Crazy. Well, so obviously in that sequence of events, you had 3 bosses, 3 senior pastors ahead of you.
Yes. And one of the actual senior pastor who had been the hometown boy that was here for almost 20 years, actually 18 years full time, he is still in our church. He was an elder at that time
Wow.
and good. Well, and honestly, I love that man. He's one that I look up to, and he is a mentor of mine.
Mm.
The senior pastor before me asked him to leave the church, and so he did for a couple of years. He left
Oh,
his
wow.
this is the church he's been a part of his whole life. I don't know why
Yeah.
you would ask him to do that, but he was faithful and he did that. And the truth is, everybody adored that man. He had been faithful for so many years here, and then he just couldn't keep up with the busyness of life anymore and wanted to retire for good reasons. But
Mm.
So your path to like the pulpit was like the reality show Survivor. Like you're the
Yeah.
guy that just had just stayed and
Last
was it
man
outsmart,
standing.
outlive, outplay.
Yeah.
I have been brought to the place where I consider that real grit. There is a
Mm.
Absolutely.
the spiritual grit that comes with longevity, but the
Yep.
benefits that come with longevity,
Yep.
I witness of. I mean, there's night and day difference in
Hmm.
when I got here for the first 2, 3 years
Hmm.
versus where I am now after 17. It,
Tony's story is not that dissimilar, is it, Tony?
Mm-mm.
mm,
Started working with
Nope.
youth.
Well, except for the youth part. So I didn't do that. But
Okay.
lots of people in my church thought I was supposed to be doing that. But no, I was a associate pastor, just really in charge of involvement and outreach and things of that nature under Mike Packer, who went to Ozark after we were done at Ozark as a
Mm.
student and then got the job out here. You remember Joe and Fina Puentes, Chris?
feel like I've met or heard the name anyway. I don't know if I
Fina
remember.
worked in the admissions department, and Mike and his wife Jamie were good friends with them, and I was
Oh,
good
at
friends with
Ozark.
them. Yeah, at Ozark.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I know who you're
Yeah,
talking about.
yeah. And so Mike's connection out here was through the Puenteses a little bit, and
Mm,
so anyways, when I moved back here after Japan, I left Japan because of sin issues and
mm,
ended up back home because I didn't know what else to do. And
mm,
so Mike kind of gave me the encouragement, like, God's not done with you. We want to bring you on part time. So start off like 10 hours a week,
mm,
worked into a full-time associate pastor position. Then he took a job at his home church in Salt Lake City and
mm,
recommended me to the elders to be the lead guy. So now I've been in this position for 11 years back here,
mm.
16 years now.
Total, what,
Myself,
11 years as the, okay.
yep, 11 years
Chris, how
as
long have you been senior minister at Garnett?
10.
Mhm.
Okay, so you had that run of like three guys you worked for like 7 years, and then eventually slipped
Mhm.
into the pulpit. And you were talking about the value of longevity. Tell
Mhm.
us some more. Like, what are some of the perks of, like, I think people need to hear this. What
Yeah.
are some of the perks of staying long term, of like planting yourself and staying?
As the youth minister, when I got here, you're the new guy. People want to trust you, but just because you have a title, they don't necessarily trust you. I would say about year 3, I started to gain the trust of families in the church.
Mhm.
Okay.
Year 3 was a mile marker for me. And I think in youth ministry, too many youth pastors turn over so quickly that they never ever get to that place where they really have the trust of families within the church. And I know some church denominations turn their people over regularly, and I've never seen the logic in that. But
Right.
I do know that the year 3 was a big deal. Year 5, I could pretty well suggest things, and people within the congregation, of course, they'd pray about it, they'd consider it, but it was, man, Chris, we don't see how that's going to work, but we trust you.
Mm.
That was a big deal for me. I
Yeah.
mean, I remember in ministry, like things changed at that point, and there had been a couple of uh, people pass away on the board that also freed up some
Mm.
freedom within the church. But then eventually, I remember around year 10, I don't know if the right word is legend, but you become a person that people in the community look up to. And if something catastrophic or tragic happens, you're the
Mm.
guy that's been here longer than anyone else. Oh,
Mhm.
call Chris immediately. I
Yeah.
don't even know that person. Call Chris. We need Chris right now. This is
Mm.
crucial. And so the opportunities within the community change drastically. And we have done some really big projects in our community. When we've seen needs, I've always been big faith guy. I believe that God is bigger than all of our problems, and I believe He's bigger than all of our struggles. And so when it comes to the challenges that we face in our communities, I petition God for them. Lord, how
Mm.
can we make a difference here? What can we do to impact our community? What can we do to reach specific people groups that are pretty well unreachable? We've had some big community projects because of the issues in our community, and
Mm.
so I get to be a part of that, and then I'm the face guy for it. So people look up to you as almost iconic, but I don't
Mm.
know. I don't care for that. I've never been a title guy, and I certainly don't like being looked at like a hero. I'm just Chris Kitts, normal guy, deal with sin, struggle like everyone,
Mm.
and try to be as real as I can be and not let it go to
It's
my
like
head.
it's like a credibility that comes, and like, you know, when you stay, like, you become known, you become trusted, you become,
Mm.
like, it's just like that dependability of, like, that guy just shows up every week and just does his job, and we can count on him.
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, there's people that stay long term that are not dependable.
Right.
So it's that combination of, like,
Hmm.
put your root down, stay, and just be like steady. Be a steady
mm,
guy for a long time. And when I was there, and I wouldn't say this if it's not true, I could tell walking around your church, seeing you interact with people, seeing all the people come up and hug you, and you hug them. And when you get up and talk, your people listen. You've got the credibility of a long-term, faithful
Mm.
pastor.
Mm.
And I think people underestimate what it's like when you get to that place where people know you and trust you.
mm,
That's a big deal.
Right. Right.
Um,
I think that's like maybe one of like the blessings and curses that come with being in a smaller community, right? Like you said, it took like 3 years plus for people to get to that point where they start to trust you because there's not a lot of like people aren't used to a bunch of rapid change in a smaller community versus a more urban suburban area where stuff's changing and growing all the time. But
mm,
once you have it, I mean, it's like gold to be
mm,
able to have that trust and that reputation. But there's one thing like along with that that I thought was fascinating that you mentioned earlier that I would really be bummed if we missed out on this. Like you talked about coming into the church and it being mostly elderly and
mm,
having a real issue of like if we don't do something different, this church isn't going to exist. And How did you approach that challenge of trying to draw in younger families, especially in a community of 3,500 people where maybe there's not a lot of new families? And I don't know the dynamic of Garnett, but it's not like, like a Newburgh, Oregon, or a McMinnville where there's like families coming in all the time, or even around Kansas City or something like that. How did you guys address that issue in your context? Because I think
Mm,
this is a very important thing for a lot of churches in small towns and pastors of these smaller community churches to overcome this hurdle that we're all facing. Churches are closing, our congregations are getting older, our pastors are getting older. How can we kind of take care of that problem in these communities to change that demographic age-wise?
that's a great question, Tony. Very sensitively. I
Mhm.
think that's the best way to put it. Very sensitively. When I came in, they liked a good old fire and brimstone style sermon. They have had the same worship leaders for a long time. We still had an organ and a piano player at that point in time, and they did dueling pianos at church. People just loved that. I mean, it was a big deal, and it attracted a lot of people, a
Mm,
lot of seniors, a lot of baby boomers. They just ate that up.
right.
When we started talking about change, whew, it was
Yeah.
it was rough. And I think early on I saw that this was going to be difficult. I mean, they flat out use these words. We want you to be the lightning rod that brings families into our church. And I said, I
Mm,
don't think you really want me to be that. They said,
right.
well, no, we know we need that. And I said, let me draw you up a 10-year plan and I'll let you see what you're asking. And so
Mm,
I did. I put together a 10-year plan and the senior pastor looked over it. He was like, that's good. I
mm,
said, if you want families and kids here, this is in my vision and what I believe, this is where we need to go.
mm.
And then he responded a month later with, you're right, we're gonna hate that.
Yeah.
That's how
Yeah.
you know you're on the right track, Chris.
And
Right.
so they said, well, we want you to do this, but can you do it in a way that doesn't involve us? I said, no.
Cowards. Yeah.
I said,
Yeah.
truthfully, I knew we wouldn't be able to merge a contemporary service with their long time old school service. It was not realistic or practical.
Right.
And so we said, could you please move? And it was weird at that time. They kind of had this hybrid halfway contemporary service going, and it was at 8 a.m. when they
Mm,
wanted the families to come because the seniors didn't want to change their later service. They wanted it to be
wow.
but they were all up having coffee with each other at 8 a.m. So what
Yeah.
does it
Right.
matter?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
we finally did get that shift happen. But then the way the services ran, it was 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 10 o'clock. And our 8 o'clock
Wow.
service, and then Sunday school at 9 o'clock, and then the 10 o'clock service that better be over by 11, or we won't make it to church before everybody gets out. We'll have to wait in line. And they were strict on you will be done at 11 o'clock.
And then
The
get out.
Shoney's buffet line's going to be backed up if we're not out in time.
That town
Shoney's.
is too small for Shoney's.
We
Oh,
don't
my
have
bad.
Shoney's here.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Mexican restaurant does get a line.
So Chris,
Uh,
is that what I saw when I was there? That you guys eventually convinced the older crowd and the more traditional to go to the 8 o'clock?
correct.
Oh, okay, I wondered. So it actually used to be the opposite.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow, okay.
And then because there was no room on either end of a service, like you couldn't go 1 minute over because you were into the next
Right.
ministry time. And
Right.
so we put 15 minutes in between each one of those items, which has bumped our late service to 10:30. And honestly, I was still hearing about how people hated that change 10 years after it happened.
Man.
I
Like, time
just
to
wish
move
we could
on,
go back to the
guys.
glory
Right.
days.
But
Dude.
what I love about what you've said so far, and I'm picking this up, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is a valuable point for any pastor that's kind of in a similar situation like we are, like in a smaller community. Vision, like long-term vision,
Mhm.
patience, and consistency are
Amen.
what get you there, not the sexy, flashy new strategies that you pick up at some conference or a book.
Mhm.
Those things can be inspiring and they can kind of light a fire under you. Don't get me wrong. But sometimes we just neglect the basic discipline of patience, longevity, and vision that lasts longer than a year out. So, kudos to you because that's really like jumping into a journey
Hmm.
which I
And
think.
to see like obviously there's a longer story, we probably don't have time to tell, but to see you, at some point you guys convinced that crowd to do the early service in favor of the families. And guys, I said this to your 8 o'clock service when I preached there. I said, I've never been to a church service at 8 a.m. in the morning. And I was shocked. And I was like, if you had told me we have an 8 a.m. service, I'd have been like, that's got to be dead as a doornail. Oh no. I mean, there was probably what, 60 people there for first service?
Maybe a little more than that, actually.
I was
Yeah.
like, holy
Wow.
cow, that's
Yeah.
incredible. 8 o'clock in the morning?
Hmm.
And that's maybe like my West Coast, I'm not like in a rural farm town. Maybe everybody gets up early. I don't know, but I was very impressed that that was how things are. Let's pivot and talk about something that I think is really important. We talked about previously that there's a quality of life to be found in a small community.
Hmm.
So talk about like what it's like to raise your family in a
Mm,
small town. Because here I am, I come in, I haven't seen your family in years, and I see three teenagers. I guess your daughter Hope. Well, I guess she's like 19, right? I see three teenagers that all love Jesus. They
mhm.
all love the church. They're all like happy to be involved with the ministry of your local church. And they've kind of grown up like in that town. They were like small kids when you moved there.
Yep.
In fact, your son was born there, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, what's the quality of life? Paint a picture for people listening that are like, what's it like to be a pastor in a small town and raise a family like that?
When I came here, I learned a valuable dynamic that was different. Out in Oregon, when you see somebody in a grocery store, they usually just walk past you. It's not that big a deal. In a church context, they'll get to know you a little bit more. But people, generally speaking, the difference between Midwest versus out west, where I grew up, was that people out there, while they have kind of a hard shell,
Mm,
once you get through that shell, it's like everything is on the table. I
right.
mean, they'll just pour their whole heart out to you. And if you don't like me, there's the door, but here's who I am. And I really grew up loving that mentality. When I came here, I mean, everyone in town wanted to know me. That was,
Hmm.
I loved it. I just ate it up. And what I eventually realized was these small town folks have a different way of thinking. There is this thing called reputation.
Hmm.
And you have to protect that reputation because the God honest truth is you will end up in the newspaper if you don't. And they actually have what's called a phone forum here, where you can call in and say anything you want about anyone without your name attached to it, and they will publish it in the newspaper.
Well, that's amazing.
I
Wow.
have been in that newspaper on so many occasions. I don't even care anymore. Whatever. Say whatever you want. I don't care. People know who I am. My reputation speaks for itself. But,
Like the
in
guys,
small
like the
town,
gossip column, is that like basically what it is?
it sells papers.
That's
It
Yeah.
incredible.
really does. Uh,
Jeez.
So
in
you're
small town, you live in a glass house.
okay.
People know your business.
Yeah.
People, they do care about your business, but the most popular person in small town is the person with the best gossip, whether it's true or not. I learn things about myself all the time that I didn't even know. I hear people at a cafe talking about that pastor, and I'm like, "Huh, that's me."
So are you, in terms of like your family and stuff,
Mm.
like there's obviously some like scrutiny that you're kind of alluding to. Like
There is.
people, everyone knows everybody and knows kind of everybody's business and people talk and stuff like that.
Like the perks and the perk though is this, and I want people to hear this over the other. The other is real and it is annoying sometimes, but the truth is they're just people being people, and they need the hope of Jesus Christ in their life. And so if I get butt hurt by those things, there's a real good possibility that that man may never hear Christ. Maybe I'm the one called to share with him, and maybe through this challenging situation, a relationship will develop, which I find in lots of cases. That's how my relationships with people start in small town. You have a relationship, you get the right to speak into their life. You don't have a relationship, don't waste your words.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to my family, my children have, yes, there's expectations that have been put upon them that I don't think are always fair. And we've addressed those in home. In school life in small town, there, especially with sports, which I suppose this probably happens everywhere, but it happens bad here. You have the right name, you get the playtime. And that's been hard because sometimes my kids can outperform certain students and they don't even get a chance. And, we've talked about that. My kids aren't going to go be athletes in professional sports, and they know that. So we don't care as much. It's a priority matter there. But with my family in the small town, it's been hard on Natasha. She's taken some hard hits by people that have expectations of senior pastors' wives that aren't
Oh,
realistic.
sure.
And when I came here, I did have that conversation with the elders that my wife is not theirs. They do not own her. They do not get to speak over her. They can speak to her like a normal person. And I said she will be involved, but she's going to be involved in the places where her giftings lie, not going to every single funeral because the
Right.
previous senior pastor's wife, that's what she did. Never missed a funeral, never missed a wedding. She was
Mm.
always at all of those ministry things. My wife has a job. She works
Mhm.
for the high school, Anderson County. She's the choir director there, and it's very, very talented when it comes to music. So
Mm.
we believe in using our giftings where God has called us to use them, and I try not to put pressure on my family
So
outside.
you've kind of been by setting some boundaries, you've
Mhm.
kind of helped kind of steer the direction, like, or the kind of experience your family's going to have in the small town and the small town church. Is that fair?
Oh, you have to. Yeah, absolutely.
I was actually just talking about that with some ladies this morning, some older ladies that are, it's a long story, but they said, um, does your wife have a lot of pressure as they're like 80-year-old ladies and have coffee with, does your wife feel a lot of pressure as the pastor's wife? And I said, no, because we've kind of set it up in a way that she gets to be Laura, a disciple of Jesus, and not Eric's
Mm.
free employee, Eric's bonus employee or whatever. Yeah, so give us some of like the upside. Like what's the positives of like living in this small
Yes.
community and stand? What are some of the blessings you've
Sorry, I
experienced
got
there? No, it's okay.
derailed there a minute ago.
That's all right.
I will tell you this. I have never, anywhere I've ever lived before, seen a community of people who come together better than
Mm.
small town America.
Mm.
We've had homes burned down, and not even hours later, there is a house fully furnished with everything that family needs to take care of their needs, and they move in the day of.
Wow.
Mm.
I mean, this is not an uncommon thing. If there's a need in our community, there's somebody who has something that will fix that need. People here come together, and I'll tell you, while we do fight ingrownly once in a while,
Mm.
if somebody is fighting against us, we are a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
I mean it. You do not want to tangle with small town America when they've got a bone to pick with you.
Isn't that a country song? Try that in a small town.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, probably. If it is, it should
This
Yeah.
episode's outro.
Yeah. Yeah. So community, you guys have like I this is something as an outsider, I'm like, houses are really cheap and they have massive lots. I could not believe how big your lot was. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. That'd be $800,000 where I live.
I paid
I was like,
99,000 for my property.
Oh, what?
I know. I could be like a
Uh,
like a slumlord if I lived in rural Kansas. I could sell my one house in Idaho and buy like five in Kansas. So yeah, like in terms of like cost of living seems like it's lower. The neighbor there was no fences, and you told me kind of like an explanation of why, but there was no fences. Like everyone's had big lots and they just kind of ran into each other's lots and there's no fences and like everywhere you go, every time we'd pass a car, Chris would be like, hey, hey, like that. And like everyone
That's
knows
a
everybody.
cultural thing here.
Yeah.
If you don't wave at people, you'll
Yeah.
make the phone for him for being a jerk.
Well, I was driving a rental car. I was driving a rental car with Maryland plates, and everybody kept being like this to me, and I'm like, no, bro, I'm not from Maryland.
Oh no, you.
I'm not doing that. I'm gonna get in an accident. So, yeah, so like definitely like a friendly kind of
mm,
like, hey, what's up? Kind of a culture, the restaurant scene, everyone knows you and like walking up to you. So that I'm guessing if you had like the bad reputation,
Mm.
like that would be a
Oh,
different experience, right?
wildfire. I mean, it
Yeah.
spreads through town so quick.
yeah.
You have to make public apologies here when you make mistakes. I'm not
Like
kidding.
to the phone
I've put it
form.
in, I have. I've put it in the paper before with my name because I refuse to publish anything without my name on it. If I'm going to say it, I'm going to say it intentionally.
Right. Right.
Hey, speaking of that, while
That's
we were
funny.
there, dude, that email thing, that was
Oh
crazy.
my word.
You got to tell that real quick because people have never, they need to know like this could happen. I've never
There are
heard.
people trying to scam people right now, big time, all over
Yes.
America. In fact, I was
Yep.
told that it was over $1 trillion of stolen money this year, primarily from leadership in churches. So a lot of our pastors in this state have gotten, and they didn't even like hack my email. They had no
Right.
access to any of my personal things. They
Right.
started an email address that looked similar to mine
Yep.
and it started emailing people through lists they got somewhere, or maybe it's Facebook friends. I have no idea, but
Hmm.
they started sending people this message, "Hey, I really am in a meeting. It's important. I need your help."
Yes.
And
Yes.
then they try to scam people for gift cards and all this nonsense. I looked back just on that one day, Eric. It was over 120 contacts that I had with people in my community that were worried about me and that I got scammed. And so that again is just an evidence of the people in this community. They do care.
Mm.
We may not have that kind of contact every single day, but yeah, that whole scam thing, man, by the time it was done, I bet it was close to 200 people reached out, whether it
I
was
mean, the
here in
entire day, like we were hanging out, like your phone was
Oh,
ringing off the
wow.
hook because people were
Wow.
like, Chris, you're
Wow.
getting scammed. You know, it's or Chris, is that you? Is that really from you? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that was crazy. So,
Yeah. That one's hit out here. Like yeah, my own mom, who was the treasurer of our church, fell for it
Wow.
and
no
bought a
wonder.
substantial amount of Amazon gift cards to email off. And yeah, anyways, that's a whole nother thing. But it's wild because it's kind of that like, hey, I'm in a prayer meeting. I need help with benevolence, like this of like, why would I be emailing anyone in a prayer meeting, y'all? Come on, like, but it's wild. People are falling for this stuff because stuff comes up in your email and it's just your name
Hmm.
without showing the actual email address. So people just assume it's you,
Yep.
you know. It's tough. It's a tough one.
It's
Well,
wrong.
Chris, you're to kind of wrap here. Sitting in an elders meeting with you, with those elders who are just good men,
Hmm.
sitting with your family and seeing your well-adjusted, faithful kids, um, walking around the community with you and seeing the kind of influence that you had. That's none of that's
Hmm.
accidental. That's the product of staying in a small community,
Hmm.
putting your head down and going to work every day, like you said, being gritty,
Hmm.
being a guy who's just willing to grind and keep moving forward. There was a great spirit in the building when I was there, and I was there for first service and second service, and kind of milled around a little bit during Sunday school hour, and people like being at your church, and you're a we don't need to talk numbers or anything, but you're a big church for a small town. Um, and I know that's just a byproduct of faithfulness. I love that. It's the title of a Eugene Peterson book. It's called A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. And which is funny because it's actually a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche, who was an atheist. But uh,
Hmm.
Eugene Peterson, that phrase always got me is like, that's what ministry is. It's a long obedience in the same direction. And to accept that mantle of senior minister after like being under three senior ministers, to maybe not have an overwhelmingly positive, vote to start with, and just to put your feet down and go to work, man. Well done. And I think I'm excited to kind of see like what happens. When we were there, and Tony doesn't know this, but I was there because I felt like I've had several connections in Kansas and Missouri. I
Hmm.
feel like, we're trying to start this small town church planting ministry, and driving around some of those small towns around your area and saying, God, what are you doing here? Is there an opportunity for a disciple making church planting church in one of these towns? And so I'm excited to be praying about that. One of his men came up to me, Tony, and said, if you're going to plant a church in one of these towns nearby, how would you do it? And I said, I'd talk to you. You're from here. You know this culture, this setting. I'd say, how do you think we ought to go about planting a church here? Instead of being like this guy from Idaho that's like, hey, I know how
Right.
to do this. Hey, man, you know small town Kansas. What would it take to plant some new churches in small town Kansas?
Yeah.
And it kind of surprised him. But I said
Mm,
to the church on Sunday, I said, you guys are, a small church in a small town in Kansas, and that uniquely qualifies you to plant small churches in small towns in Kansas.
mm,
And so instead of saying like we're small, we're in a small town, we could never plant a church. No, absolutely wrong.
right.
You know
Right.
how to do what you're doing, and
Mhm.
there's communities nearby that could use the same kind of successful, loving Bible teaching ministry. So, my hope and prayer is, Chris, that you and me and some of the guys we've mentioned together are going to start praying, and from those prayers, God's going to open a door of opportunity to see a small town church go to one of your places out there. So I'll leave you
Yeah.
with the final word. You got anything you want to say in closing, either of you, before we
Mm.
wrap it up today?
Just really appreciate your longevity and the example of that, and just your vision and your patience, man. I think that's something that a lot of people can be encouraged by and learn from. So thank you, Chris.
Mm. Thank you. Yeah, I'm honored that I get to be here, and I don't see it as anything amazing or special. I just keep serving the Lord, and I think that's what we're all called to do.
Hmm.
Well said. I think a lot of times the things that we see that are, ministries that we find impressive, it's like, what's the secret? Faithfulness.
Mm.
Just be faithful. Grow where God plants you. So, well,
Mm.
thanks for joining us, man, and giving us your time. I know you're a busy guy and appreciate you being on here and being on the board. Had our first official board meeting yesterday.
Yeah.
We didn't really solve anything. We just kind of presented all the issues, all the challenges. I should say the challenges ahead. And
Yeah, I was praying
Chris,
about them.
yeah, absolutely. Chris, glad to have you. So, hey, thanks for listening, everybody. If you like what we're doing, please like or subscribe where you watch or listen. If you're interested in the Small Town Network, you can find us online at smalltownnetwork.com. And if you believe in the importance of planting disciple-making churches in smaller communities, we'd love you to consider partnering with us in prayer and financial support. You've been listening to the Small Town Pastor Podcast.